DOWC is a rapidly growing service contract provider whose expansive line of F&I products includes Adventure Guard, specialty protection for power sports vehicles. Voted the #1 Dealer's Choice Award dealer-owned warranty company provider. Learn more about DOWC's customizable F&I offerings at dowc.com.
Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to another great episode of On the Throttle with Jacqui Van Ham and my buddy Josh over here, bringing you all of the newest news and everything that's going on out in the world of power sports and motorcycling. I don't know about you and where your neck of the woods is, but here in my neck of the woods, it has been rainy and soggy and literally rainy and soggy, Josh, because I just managed to drop the cord for my headset into my water just a second ago. So fingers crossed that this whole program works out, because I mean, I don't know what's going to happen here.
I'm not surprised. It happens.
We're going to be doing a show underwater here in a second. But all jokes aside, sure. We always try to bring you some awesome stories going on out here in power sports. And today is definitely, Josh, a bit of beep, 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 breaking news, because we're going to chat a little bit about the news going on with the folks over at Suzuki. And it is hot off of the presses. And then what else do you have going on in your neck of the woods, Josh?
So there's India invades Britain. I figure with everyone invading everyone else right now, we're going to say that, but it's just with a boatload of money is what they're invading with. And we also going to talk about GASGAS, and it has nothing to do with Cinco de Mayo coming up.
Cinco de Mayo, or it has nothing to do with the price of gas either. We are not going to be going down that rabbit hole either.
No.
However, if you do ride power sports, which I'm assuming you do, or ride motorcycles and you're watching this program, good for you, because look at you getting ahead of the curve and saving some money on the price of gas, right? So anyway, what I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit of La Dolce Vita, because I've got some stories going on from both Ducati and Moto Guzzi. But as I just mentioned just a second ago, our first thing that we're going to talk about just real quick, because this is absolutely breaking news, it is not totally firmed up yet, was this bombshell released from the folks over at Suzuki. And Josh, I think you've got a slide and you've got some details for us.
Yes, so Suzuki basically internally announced that they are out of MotoGP after 2022. Hence the graphic that we have right here. Now, as of late, Suzuki's had some struggles. They've been up and down, but 2020 on Mir won the championship. So there's a lot to it. So Suzuki is contracted with the company that owns MotoGP through 2026, like everyone else that's running right now. So if they find a replacement for Suzuki, whether someone else takes the spot or whatever, or the two spots that they have, or whatever, or they still make Suzuki run a bike, there's a ton of this stuff in the air. Now, something that I found interesting as I started digging more on this is there was an announcement. This announcement came out Monday. Then on Tuesday, basically, there is the announcement of Suzuki's earnings and what Suzuki's done over the past quarter. And Suzuki is the only company that has not had increased sales over the past 2 years. So there's a lot to unpack with this. This is a story that we're breaking that has a lot more to talk about, I'm sure, as we're coming up here. So I'm interested to see this, where this goes. As someone that has a Suzuki in the garage, let's see what happens.
Yeah, so I definitely think that this is an incredibly interesting story. The Suzuki big dogs basically pulled the team aside at their race event last weekend and let the entire team know that this is it. As of 2022, they are not planning on returning to MotoGP. And as you just mentioned, they've got Alex Rin and John Mir on the paychecks on their under contract for right now, if not into 2023. So I'm sure those two gentlemen were probably quite surprised to hear about this little bit of news. And also because they actually have been doing some pretty decent racing. So I am really shocked for Suzuki to make this statement, and was completely bewildered by it. You know, whenever we see major manufacturers pulling out of such huge events like this, generally speaking, it's because they want to focus that big, huge chunk of cash into going into some other type of event. They usually don't just pull it for no reason. It usually means they're going to do something else. That brings me to mind of, I believe it's Yamaha recently announced that they are going to be pulling out of, I think, Paris Dakar this past year. Do I
Yep.
remember that right, Josh? They're going to be
Yes.
pulling out. They're going to be doing some different types of race, but they're going to be doing different types of racing instead. So then I was like, well, where else is Suzuki going to go racing? Where else is this money going to be spent? And then as soon as I got my little mind wrapped around those ideas, the folks at Dorna, who is the parent company of MotoGP, stepped in and whipped out their own great big press release, letting the folks at Suzuki know that not quite so fast. They can't just take all their money and run. There are some contractual agreements that have to happen.
Correct.
Because they have to have a full grid. That means another manufacturer is going to have to step up. Ideally, what Dorna would like to see happen is for them to have 6 different manufacturers at play with a handful of bikes each. Right now, currently, Ducati seems to be fielding a larger chunk of the field than
Yes.
everybody else. Suzuki only has 2 racers and 2 bikes that they are fielding, along with a handful of other manufacturers. So anyway, we are all going to have to wait and see where we are going and what's going on with this conversation. But I also think it was incredibly interesting, and I was not aware of the fact that Suzuki's numbers are down, which is completely shocking to me because everybody's been selling and going crazy, and it's just been a field day out here as far as sales for the past 2 years in Powersports. So I'm going to follow this story very closely to see if we can get to the bottom of where's the money going. What's
One
going
thing
on
that's
with
kind of
Suzuki?
interesting with that is 2 things that I've heard with that is when you look at Suzuki, their latest and greatest motorcycle, that new GT 1000, basically, the Sport Tourer, it's using a motor that was basically designed in 2005.
Wow.
So there's not much new stuff coming out of Suzuki. And on top of that, they've promised to go with a lot of stuff, a lot of electrics, a lot of battery stuff. So are they moving that money over there? I saw that as speculation out there. It's a possibility. So
It's definitely a possibility. You know that we'll be bringing you that story the second that this all unfolds. Thank you again for tuning in, everybody, and thank you for clicking, liking, and sharing all of these videos with your friends that love keeping on top, their fingers on the pulse, Josh, of motorcycling and power sports. Now, for my first story today, I want to discuss a little bit of a beautiful bike. This has been floating around on the internet this past week. It is a limited production machine that's going to be coming from the folks over at Ducati. And as always, woo, is she sexy, as I like to say about the folks over at Ducati. And this absolutely is a very, very sexy bike. This is their hyper machine. This beautiful, beautiful bike. I personally love this machine. To me, this Hypermotard is absolute hooliganism at its finest. This looks like it'll do everything, do it well, do it fun, and throw a wheel in the air. I mean, I love these bikes anyway, regardless. This is kind of a neat machine. They're going to be producing only 100 of these in this very limited edition paint scheme. This paint is actually decals, carefully layered one on top of each other, and then clear coated and buttoned all the way up. But this beautiful bike, they're only making 100 of them. This is US market only, and this is paying a bit of an homage to a concept bike that they showed at a really, really neat show in Italy. There's this show every single year that takes place on Lake Como, and it is a super, super premier concourse event. Anyway, they showed a concept bike, and this bike is paying homage to that beautiful bike that was at Villa d'Este in Italy. This incredible looking machine is the SP edition, the base Hypermotard, by the way, just price-wise. We'll talk a little bit of money now. As I mentioned, they're only making 100 of these. The base Hypermotard is priced at $14,195. This RVE, which is what's on your screen right now, at $14,695, and the SP, which is their top of the line performance bike, is going to be at $17,695. I thought this was very, very beautiful. I am a sucker also for this new trend of half coloring, painting the wheels. I just love this. I think this is incredibly sexy and beautiful and fun, and they're only making 100 of them, and I think that is a very neat, cool thing. So I wanted to go ahead and show that on today's program. And speaking of hooliganism and hooligan bike. I did see some stats for this that absolutely blew me away. I think the brake horsepower for this bad boy is something like 116. Let me see if I can track down the number out here on the big press release. I believe, like I was saying, the power behind this bike is absolutely bananas for how small and light and nimble. Josh, are you a fan of this bike?
So it's interesting. This is the only way that I can put it is loud. And I mean, anything all the way back to the KTM Duke 2 that I owned 15 years ago. I've loved the Motard type setup. And as soon as people started the wheels like this, I love that. So this is one of those things. It is loud enough, just standing still with the paint and everything that,
Yes.
I like it. But like any other Motard style bike, you may as well come up with a little envelope to stick your license in the back of your helmet. So that way the police officer can just take it. Because that is totally what these are made for.
I think so too, right? These are just dead straight up hooligan bikes to me. This
Correct.
just looks like so much fun and so much trouble all in one package. I am personally here for it. I love it. I did track down the number. Ducati, this is powered by a twin cylinder 937 with a claimed output of 114. I was right, 114 horsepower and 71 foot-pound of torque. Woo! I'm glad that they use decals on this because that would strip the paint right off of any normal bike. Correct. For sure. So anyway, that's what's new and just released this past week, that limited edition 100 run new Hypermotard from the folks over at Ducati. What's going on in your neck of the woods, Josh?
So speaking new and somewhat limited, so there is the storied name that everyone loves of Norton. Norton was just kind of bought, if I remember correctly, back in 2020, they were acquired by TVS, which is an Indian company. Indian has now said, hey, look, we are going to dump $120 million into this company to make sure that what we're talking about comes to fruition. And it's something that you and I have talked about on the show before, Jacqui, that so many of these companies, they get these great concepts and they get 80% of the way there, and then the cash runs out. An investment like this, to me, is just amazing. So the big thing that came out with this is they are saying this is to help with the imminent launch of the V4 SV, which I know I have a couple of pictures of here. That is a decidedly British-looking motorcycle. I mean, the lines, everything about it says just over the top, and that's kind of one of the things that I like about that. So it has some features on it that are just kind of crazy too, and this is a carbon fiber fuel tank. That is the only way that they could mold something that would fit the shape that they wanted it to. In this, it is also a 1200cc V4 that is on a 72 degree offset. That is good for 182 horsepower, which is basically two 1997 Honda Civics. There are 8 injectors that pump fuel into cylinders that are running 13.6 to 1 compression. So this is not something you want to run the cheap gas through. On the screen now, we have the 961 Commando that they did a limited run on to satisfy customer orders that already had deposits. To me, the big thing and the reason why I wanted to talk about this bike also is this is nothing new, but this is them honoring deposits that had already been there. And really, they didn't have to do that when they acquired the company, but they did, which to me shows that they want to make sure that the name lives on and they've got the cash behind them to do it. So I'm really excited to hear this news. I'm really excited to see that they are putting the cash behind this to make these bikes come back. They will not be cheap. Everything that I saw on this was mid to upper 30,000 range, but from those earlier shots that I had, they looked worth it. Is this something that you are going to be drooling over, Jacqui?
Oh my gosh, yes. So the relaunched Commando absolutely has my name written all over it. The V4 is cool. It's clearly high performance. It is clearly a very like a bespoke. There's only a very particular
Yes.
client who's going to buy this bike. I get it. It's cool. Carbon fiber, yummy, cool. No, the Commando is way better. The Commando, that Commando is so beautiful, and you're right. So the Commando has been around for 500 years. Norton is another one of these
Correct.
brands that has had the paddles put to it 3, 4, 5 times now. The last incantation was another British conglomerate, or however you want to phrase it. A gentleman named Stuart Garner just got his
Yeah.
wrist slapped, really, for spending a bunch of money inappropriately. He was supposed to be building these bikes. He spent it in a different way. The charges were pressed against him. There was a threat of jail time. Anyway, that's a whole nother huge dramatic story.
Yep.
But it's the reason how Norton came up on the auction block in the first place in 2019, 2020-ish. And that's how TVS was able to snap them up, is because of this whole Stuart Garner fiasco. But this bike has been part of that Stuart Garner era, and then right before it, what was it, like Colorado Motor Works had their
Yep.
hand in it somewhere. There was a West Coast based company that had their hand in it somewhere. I don't remember the whole story, but it was much more this styling. It was much more this very traditional gentleman's machine with the traditional logo, the traditional black paint with the striping on it. Very classic, very, very typical Norton. You know how much I love this bike. You know how much I would love to have one of these in my garage, even the modern version like this is. But you're right. I totally agree with you. The fact that TVS stepping up and slapping out a great big huge paycheck to purchase Norton is one thing, but them honoring the debts and honoring the folks that already bought in to the relaunched
Yep.
Norton experience as it was supposed to happen but never did, honoring them and producing this bike and creating it and making sure that it can get into the hands of those customers is super, super, super important to keep
Correct.
the name in good standing, to not tarnish
Yep.
it, to not diminish it and cheapen it and make it even more of a joke than I've already made on this show about how many times this brand has been relaunched. Poor Norton. Keep on going, Norton. Hopefully TVS is the right company. We have
Yes.
discussed it at length, how companies like Norton and Indian Motorcycle have had the paddles put to them several times. It does take a company with really deep pockets to make this situation work out.
Correct.
And hopefully TVS is that company. They have acknowledged that they are spending clearly a ton of money on getting this all going, and all of the infrastructure and the factory and the tooling and the die and paying people and employees in order to make sure that this bike is going to be built in England to the highest specs that it can. It is going to be an expensive machine. This is not going to be, the $10,000, $15,000 1970s used Norton. This is not going to be that. This will be a $30,000 plus handcrafted British made bike, and I am really
Correct.
excited to see where they are headed. But I love this bike. It is absolutely stunning, and I would love to have one.
Yeah, no, and it's funny when you mention that too, because I go the opposite way. And when I see the V4, the V4 SV, it to me it reminds me of Bimota 20 years ago, when it was all this super carbon, handcrafted, one off, looks a little crazy, but performs to the nth level. That's what it kind of reminds me of, and I think they'll be successful with it. So I'm good with that. So speaking of like European stuff, what do you have the European American connection here?
Yes, so my second story for today, sticking with the La Dolce Vita theme, another great Italian brand with a lot of history, who I don't think gets enough love in this country. The brand is
Yeah.
Moto Guzzi. Moto Guzzi has been around for a very, very long time. They've got a huge, huge history. They're a fantastic company based in Mandello dell'Ario in Italy, which is up by Lake Como. They still have their factory there. You could still go on a tour of the factory. They are still producing bikes. This is still a current machine. Its parent company, however, is Piaggio. Piaggio has not really traditionally made huge strides in this country with Moto Guzzi, which I think is really unfortunate, because I think their bikes are just super cool. I really, really enjoy what they do. I've had the chance to ride several of vintage and modern Moto Guzzi. I think they're just neat, cool things. And who doesn't love a shaft-driven bike, right? So I think that Moto Guzzi is wonderful, and I love that this is how they are handling some of their experiences here in the United States. And here is why I think that this is also important. So, as Josh and I talk about a lot on this show, we've got a lot of new people joining our motorcycling family as new riders and new users during COVID time. We've got a lot of new faces out there. However, these new faces may or may not be sticking around in motorcycling. What if they get bored? What if they have to go back to a boring office cubicle job and they don't have time to ride anymore? Like, what is going to happen to the state of motorcycling? I want these people to stay with us and stay in our community. And I think manufacturers need to step up and do more community building. And the folks at Moto Guzzi inadvertently are completely agreeing with me, because they have been running for the past 2 years now the Moto Guzzi experience. The Moto Guzzi experience that is taking place in North America for 2022 is a tour that takes riders through the Ozarks, Yellowstone, and the best of California. And these are several different tours. These are 3 different tours running at 3 different times, obviously. It's an event that is returning. Its debut year was last year, so this is the only second year of doing it, but they had such success with it that they're bringing it back. It is a more refined travel itinerary to help Guzzi enthusiasts experience some of America's most iconic riding locations. Guzzi will have 3 models available for rent: the V7, the V85 TT, and the V85 TT Travel. These motorcycles provide provide upright riding position, of course. And the reason why I love this is because you can rent these bikes from Moto Guzzi, go out with like-minded Moto Guzzi enthusiasts, or at least the Moto Guzzi curious, and go spend several days on the road and actually really experience these bikes in these beautiful, pretty iconic American locations. I think this is the way that you build community. I think this is also the way that you help sell new bikes. As far as demo truck experience, I mean, it's cool. I love seeing new shiny bikes. I'm a trade show junkie. I'm a nerd. I love seeing the new stuff too. But are you really going to learn that much about a bike and fall in love with something in 25 minutes? I'm just not totally convinced that this is the only way to let people experience bikes. So I think by them cultivating and curating this rad multi-day experience where they pick like these great restaurants to go to. They have the hotels set up, the accommodations set up, the bikes are all set up for you. There's quite probably, I'm 99% sure, a chase vehicle to carry some of your stuff with you. I think this is absolutely the present and future of how demo experiences should be held by OEM and manufacturers. What do you think about that, Josh? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you go on this ride?
Oh, definitely. I definitely would go on that ride. And it's what I find so interesting is like anytime I hop on something as a test experience, I mean, it's kind of what I do. I'm trained to analyze something very quickly. Most people get on it and they aren't looking for things. They're like, oh, my butt's comfortable on this, or my hands aren't numb. All they're going to see is if something's glaringly bad, but they aren't going to be analyzing everything. To do an experience like this where it is go out, it's get the experience with it. Motorcycles, this is not a cheap hobby. That's why all of us are broke. I mean, seriously.
Teach your kids to love motorcycles. They'll never have money for drugs.
No, exactly it. So to me, it's the biggest thing in that is the fact that, I mean, this is a huge investment for anyone, no matter where you're at financially. And to make that decision on a 20-minute test ride is so difficult, especially if you haven't done a ton of them. To do something like this where you're going to have $500, $600, $700 of skin in the game, but you're going to know that, yes, I love this bike, or, oh my God, that thing was terrible. Super worthwhile investment. And on top of it, you're building the community. You're going to make, I mean, rides like this are where friendships are built. I'm all for it. This is the right way to go.
Yes, agreed. I have had several experiences, not quite like this. And I've got a couple more slides showing some of the beautiful backdrops and bikes that they're going to take. Ashley, if you want to click through those while I'm talking. I have had a couple of experiences, actually, I've had experiences like this, but some of my favorite riding experiences are the ones where I can invite my friends to, whether it's like a school. I've taken a couple track day schools. I've done a couple of longer group, like little mini group rides and things. You're right. These are like lifetime friendships are built out on these rides.
Yep.
Not only are they inspirational and show you the capabilities of a bike that you may or may not be that familiar with, but it's also showing you it's also inspiring you, not just to open your wallet and buy something, but it's inspiring you to travel, to get out, to use these machines in the way that they're meant to be used, not just going around a parking lot for 25 minutes. So I think that these are really excellent. I think that this is just such a cool thing. I mean, I'm even going to look into some of these and consider doing these on my own. Just as a consumer, because I just totally support this idea and I think it is such a neat, cool thing. I just wanted to give a little bit of love to Moto Guzzi today for participating for the second year in a row in such a neat program to help turn motorcyclists not only onto their bikes, but onto our community and riding and touring and traveling and experiencing motorcycling in the best, biggest version of itself, which is getting out on the road with strangers who are bound to become some of your best friends. So that's my second story for today. Josh, what do you have going on for your second story?
So there is a wonderful motorcycle out there in the KTM 690 and the Husqvarna 701. But if you're like me and your favorite color is red, what are you going to do? Well, supposedly coming out here soon, GASGAS is releasing the SM and ES 700. Now, the SM means Supermoto for all of you that went someplace else with it. These bikes have proven, I mean, in the KTM and Husqvarna, clothing, they have proven to be absolutely amazing bikes. As we mentioned before with the Ducati Hypermotard, these are just ways to rip tires off on the street, at least the rear tire. The front tire is never going to be on the ground. So much fun to back in the corners. As far as on the trail and in the dirt and stuff like that, I know tons of people that have 690 701s, and they do pretty much everything amazingly well. They are very much a Swiss Army knife motorcycle, and that's why they have done so well. I mean, the specs are going to look familiar. It is 693 cc's. It is 74 horsepower, which makes putting that front tire skyward no problem. There is a 13.5 liter fuel tank, ABS on it. It's got a slipper clutch. There's advanced rider modes. So it is not shown on the US site yet, but there's a press release from GASGAS saying it will be there. So why are they doing this? That is the big question that I wanted to answer in this. So I've done some digging and I've done some talking with a number of people, and a bunch of us kind of agree that this, with them all being owned by the same company here, they're kind of taking a General Motors-esque strategy of what GM did in the 80s and 90s with Buick, Chevy, Cadillac, and a number of other items. So KTM is the race-ready one. Husqvarna is I don't want to say tiered back, but it's styled differently. It's done differently. GASGAS they're looking at is, okay, is this going to be the Chevy where on this it's going to be a little bit scaled down? We don't know, but I see that as definitely a possibility. It's going to open them up for, once again, people that says, well, okay, I don't necessarily want the KTM. I don't like Swedish people or something of that nature, that maybe they don't think Sweden's neutral anymore. Not whatever reason they don't like Sweden, they're going to be able to go with the GASGAS. To me, it's an interesting play. I'm interested to see how this works out, because you've got 3 different ways to buy kind of pretty close to the same bike. It looks like it'll have some different ride modes and things of that nature, some slightly different tuning. It'll be interesting to see how it sells. Is this, so the strategy of the 3 different manufacturers carrying the same bike, I was trying to figure out how I was going to word that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Jacqui? I mean, is this I remember when Kawasaki also had their version of the DRZ 400. What's your thoughts on the route they're taking with this?
Well, I mean, as my dad always said, there's a butt for every seat, and I
Yes.
think that the adventure market is so huge, and I think that there's room for just about everybody to be out here, which is why GasGas is releasing its very first street bike in the history of GasGas as a company. I think GasGas having a background, such a legacy background in dirt bikes, makes me
Hmm.
think that this is going to be a much more dirt bikey feeling adventure bike than some of the other adventure bikes that are on the market that have way more bells and whistles and computers and cushioning and luxury and plushness and heated grips and all that jazz. KTM is a little bit of that guy. It's a little bit more like bells and whistles. Husqvarna is a little bit more stripped down but very modern styling. And I think this GasGas is a great position in a sweet spot to be just a straight up dirt bike with a little bit more road manners to it. And I think that is a really, really interesting proposition, because I hear from people all the time that love the idea of adventure bikes, but then they're like, well, why is it so heavy? If I actually really go in the dirt on my adventure bike, which by the way, a lot of people don't, but a lot of people, there's a handful of folks out there that are like, I really want to go
Correct.
play in the dirt, but this Pan America is too heavy. It's got too much stuff on it. The GS is too big and too heavy. It's got too much stuff on it, but I need something with a bigger engine that'll do dirt. So I think this is kind of a really nice sweet spot for GasGas. And with it being underneath that umbrella, they have access to all sorts of nice technology to make sure that it goes down the road quite nicely as well when it is not living its best
For
life
sure.
out in the dirt. And it's red. So, I mean, there's that.
Yeah, no, and I just anything red, I'm just going to be a sucker for. So yeah.
Well, that's going to be it for today's program. We covered a lot of bases out here. We talked about
We
some
did.
breaking news with Suzuki. We talked about some dirt bikes, some adventure bikes, and we talked a little bit about La Dolce Vita out here, covering all of the best and newest new news going on out here in motorcycling and power sports. As always, thank you for tuning in, everybody. You can always watch all of our previous programs out there on the YouTubes or on Facebook on the Motorcycle and Power Sports news pages. So make sure you go click back through and check out some of our previous programs. Heck, you never know. You might just learn something. Thank you for tuning in. Feel free to click like and share this video with all of your friends that love watching and learning about new stuff going on out here in motorcycling. And we will see you next week.